What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton has been competing with a hidden disadvantage in his car throughout the season, and that Ferrari did not realize so far? Who is responsible, and what does this find for the future of the Italian team imply? After the checkered flag in the Red Bull ring, while the transmission spotlights focused on the podium and post-carrier statements of the most prominent pilots, something unusual was cooked silently inside the Ferrari box. It was not a simple routine review of Lewis Hamilton's car. What Frédéric Vasseur, team director, found lit a spark that quickly became a technical and institutional fire within the Scuderia. An unexpected technical finding, buried between telemetry data and track observations, revealed that something did not square and was not new. The really alarming thing was that this irregularity had been months affecting the SF25 without anyone in Maranello to detect it clearly. For weeks, team engineers had tried to justify Hamilton problems with standard explanations: adaptation to the new car, pilot differences against Leclerc, small configuration errors. But the data did not lie. Hamilton showed anomalous patterns in its curve behavior, especially in pronounced lateral load areas. The British constantly corrected with the steering wheel, applied micro-adjusts in straight paths, and complained about a sense of instability that did not coincide with what the simulators projected. The engineers, facing the lack of visible indicators, assumed that it was a natural learning curve for a pilot who left behind a decade in Mercedes. But they were wrong. It was in Austria where the turning point occurred. During a more thorough post-carrier inspection, motivated by an anomalous degradation of the flat background that had already caused sanctions in previous careers, Ferrari's technical team discovered a structural discrepancy that did not appear in the simulations. Hamilton's SF25 had a subtle defect, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, but lethal in performance terms. The aerodynamic load fluctuated in key sectors of the circuit, and not by external adjustments, but for a loss of stiffness that should not exist in that chassis. It was as if the car was breathing irregularly under pressure, weakening its ability to generate constant support in medium and high-speed curves. When Vasseur received the full technical report, his reaction was immediate and forceful. It was not simply a design failure. It was a problem that had been ignored, overlooked, or, in the worst case, undercover within the technical department. It was not only a structural defect. What bothered Vasseur was the time that had elapsed without identifying it or communicating it clearly. Months of work, of simulations, of race weekends with adjustments that were not used because they were being applied on an unstable basis. At that time, the frustration of the French director was not only technical, it was also strategic and human. How could you trust your own data if they did not reflect reality on the track? How were he supposed to build a winning car if the fundamentals of the design were committed to a defect that no one had dared to admit? This discovery not only affects the performance of the car or the construction championship. What was revealed in Austria represents a fracture of confidence within the team. A crack that, if it does not close with firm decisions and structural changes, could put in check the entire Hamilton project in Ferrari. Because the 7-times world champion came with a mission: return the glory to Maranello. But glory cannot be built on a defective basis, much less when that base has been hidden in full view for so long. At first glance, Ferrari SF25 did not seem to have major defects. Its aesthetic line was clean, its evolution regarding SF24 seemed logical, and its performance during the pre-season test had been acceptable. But under that stylized surface, a structural failure was hidden that would compromise not only the performance of Lewis Hamilton, but the complete viability of the Ferrari technical project by 2025. This was not a simple issue of poorly adjusted aerodynamics or poorly calibrated motor maps. It was a concept failure, and more specifically, of mechanical architecture. A base error that transformed SF25 into a trap for its own team. Ferrari's choice to implement a rear suspension with pull rod scheme, instead of the pushrod that dominated in other teams, was an ambitious bet. This technical solution offered theoretical advantages in aerodynamic packaging and airflow efficiency to the diffuser. However, in practice, that architecture turned out to be too flexible for the dynamic demands of the current generation of cars with soil effect. The structural rigidity, a fundamental pillar in any F1 design, was sacrificed by a promise of performance that never materialized. The lack of rigidity in the rear suspension caused erratic track behavior on the track. The car did not maintain a stable height under load, which radically altered the efficiency of the flat background and reduced the ability to generate aerodynamic load constantly. In essence, the SF25 was unable to support its optimal performance in fast curves, collapsing in sectors where grip should have been its strength. This defect was not progressive or predictable. It was chaotic, unpredictable. Therefore, while the engineers adjusted ailerons or touched suspension adjustments, the car continued to behave as if it had their own will. Hamilton's case was even more serious. Comparative data between its SF25 and Charles Leclerc showed that, despite using similar configurations, the aerodynamic load generated by Lewis's car was significantly lower. Simulator simulations did not match what Hamilton felt on the track. The British pilot constantly reported a sensation of disconnection between what should happen and what really happened when the accelerator stepped on or turned the steering wheel. Every microadjust he performed seemed to fight the car, not with him. In theory, these irregularities should have been detected in the initial correlation phase between wind tunnel, CFD, and simulator. But they weren't. And that diagnostic failure is equal to or more serious than the structural defect itself. Because it means that Ferrari's validation systems, from its base in Maranello to the track, were operating with a margin of error too wide. What seemed to be a divergence between pilot and team, a matter of different driving styles, was actually an underestimated and poorly managed technical crisis. In Formula One, time is the most expensive resource. Each concept error is paid in tenths. Each tenth loss translates into positions and points in championships. And Ferrari, not detecting or correcting this problem in time, not only compromised Hamilton's performance, but wasted a critical development window in the first months of the year. While McLaren consolidated his technical leadership and Red Bull readjusted his strategy, Ferrari was debated in patches and excuses. What happened after the Austrian Grand Prix is not just a technical problem that affects a car. It is a crack that threatens to become a fracture, not only in the SF25 chassis, but also in the relationship between Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari. And you don't have to be an expert to understand what is at stake. If the 7-time world champion does not feel that the structure that surrounds him is at his height, the entire project runs the risk of crumbling. Because Hamilton did not come to Ferrari to learn from scratch. He came to win. And what he found in these first months is far from being the ideal environment to fulfill that promise. Since his arrival, Hamilton has been clear in his approach. He did not come to Maranello by nostalgia or for completing a romantic history. He did it for the challenge, for the ambition to return Ferrari to the throne of Formula One. For this, he contributed not only his experience, but an obsessive work mentality for the detail. Each free session, each simulation, every briefing was designed to build a solid base. But that base has turned out to be more fragile than expected. What in Mercedes was taken for granted, a precise correlation between wind, simulator, and track tunnel, in Ferrari has been a constant source of frustration. The data does not fit. Updates do not work predictably. And now, with the confirmation of a hidden structural defect that affected only its chassis, the message that Hamilton receives is devastating. Not only has it been competing at a disadvantage, but the team did not know or did not want to detect it in time. These types of errors are not minor when we talk about a pilot with his history. It is not a rookie in development or a second pilot in a hierarchical structure. This is the most laureate pilot in modern history, which was promised a competitive car and a serious project. And for now, what has received is the opposite. But it's not just a personal disappointment issue. The risk to Ferrari goes far beyond the discomfort of its new signing. Because if Hamilton loses confidence, damage multiplies. An insecure pilot does not yield to the fullest. And a pilot of his caliber, when he feels that his time is being wasted, does not usually remain silent. We have already seen it in other stages of his career. When the car does not respond, when the team does not react, Hamilton is not the one he conceals. And in an environment as politically delicate as Ferrari's, a critical voice from the inside can generate a chain reaction. At this point, Vasseur faces one of the biggest challenges of its management at the head of the Scuderia. It is not enough to correct the technical failure. You must recover the confidence of your star pilot, reorganize the technical area, and above all, demonstrate that Ferrari is willing to make deep structural decisions. Not simple adjustments, but real changes in the way in which the car is conceived, develops, and validated. Because the margin of error in 2025 has been drastically reduced. McLaren dominates the championship. Mercedes has resurfaced strongly. And Red Bull, despite its internal crises, still has Max Verstappen in attack mode. In this scenario, Ferrari cannot afford an internal fracture. And much less an emotional disruption of its most media pilot. Because if Hamilton feels that his presence in Maranello is becoming a burden instead of a powerful alliance, the multi-annual contract he signed can become a mere role. In modern F1, even the firmer agreements can be rewritten when the objectives are not met. What comes next will be decisive. The next races will not only test the new technical package that Ferrari prepares in response to the scandal, they will also test the team cohesion. If the results do not improve, if the problems persist, if trust is not rebuilt from the base. So yes, we could be facing one of the greatest sports and media failures of the modern era of Ferrari, because Hamilton's name does not support half-inks. And when the risk of failure is proportional to the size of the bet, any crack can become rupture. What has just happened in Ferrari is not a simple technical error or a bad weekend in a long season. It is a turning point. The anomaly discovered in the Hamilton car, its impact on the performance of the equipment, and the angry reaction of Vasseur not only tell us about a structural failure. They reveal a much deeper and more dangerous truth. At the cusp of Formula One, there is no space for complacency or for operational blindness. And much less when it comes to a team with the historical weight and the expectations that Ferrari loads. It is inevitable to ask questions. How is it possible that a problem of this magnitude has gone unnoticed during so many races? Leave me your opinion in the comments.